Buenas tardes, everyone. My name is Graham Melendez, and my pronouns are he, him, él. Bienvenidos. I'd like to welcome all our wonderful participants to today's workshop hosted by IWC and Luna. As you can tell, I speak Spanish. I'm from Cusco, Peru, and I'm proud for my heritage. IWC, or Immigrant Welcome Center's mission for all immigrants is to help them thrive across Indiana, and the vision to be a trusted partner and advocate for all with the values of equity, accountability, trust, and collaboration. Since '06, IWC has served more than 13,000 immigrants, and we hope to keep on doing this endeavor. Today, we are happy to partner with Luna Language Services for this event, discussing how organizations can budget ahead to ensure they have language support resources in place. At least 67.3 million people in the US speak a foreign language at home. Here in the Indianapolis area, at least 13.5% of Marion County residents use a language other than English in their home. This is both interesting and important to think about as a nonprofit organization because it gives us a glimpse into seeing the layout of all immigrants and what they bring to this wonderful country, specifically when it comes to their language support. As you all are aware today, we are in a virtual arena. So as you would in a general workshop, go ahead and submit your questions, but today do it during the chat function on Zoom, and make sure that they're fresh in your minds, and we'll pause for questions throughout the event. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome the fabulous Tiffany Hansen. She is the manager of strategic engagement with Luna Language Services, and she'll be starting the discussion today with an overview of how language services are priced. She will also walk you through an example of how an organization might budget for a few different projects during the year. Tiffany?
Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So we're going to go through a lot of information. I wanted to let you know that I will be providing a recording of the information as well as the slide deck to all registered participants afterwards. So if we go through this somewhat quickly, all the information will be available to you later. So welcome to Budgeting for Language Resources for Nonprofits. This was a workshop that actually Una and I started to put together several years ago when, oh my goodness, Google Slides is gonna be the end of me. We're just gonna do it from here. So this is a workshop that Una and I put together because we found that we would many times have folks from nonprofits that would come to Luna and they would say, hey, we have a person that speaks this language that we need to help and we need support, but we don't have funds budgeted to be able to pay for your services. What do we do? So we started doing more of these planning workshops, and really that started with language access planning. So just to back up for a second. So if you are not familiar with Luna, Luna is a language services company. We provide 24/7 coverage, and we provide services in over 200 spoken languages, as well as American Sign Language. So you can see my fabulous colleague, Becca, who is also interpreting for us today. It's a great example of the services that we provide. So one of the things that we help folks to do is to think about language access planning. So doing the whole planning process so that you can be able to budget, right? So these are the most basic steps of language access planning, and we're going to be focusing really on these first three steps as we go through the budgeting portion of this morning. So the first one is going to be outline specific goals for your organization as they relate to communicating with LEP or Limited English Proficient community members. So the first thing that some organizations may consider are your goals compliance-based? Do you just need to have a plan in place and resources in place for if folks reach out to you? I do want to mention here that through Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, recipients of federal funding are mandated by the government to provide accessible services to folks of all protected classes. So this includes things that you may be familiar with, like sex or age. National origin is one of those protected classes, as well as disability. So organizations are required to provide language access, because language is a proxy to making sure that those communities are taken care of. So your goals may be compliance based. Also, you may utilize real data to determine what your organization's reach currently looks like, and then set goals for what you might want that to look like in the future. So some places to get some of that data are going to be the census. We're seeing more and more census data from 2020 coming out. You can reach out to providers like Luna to provide you with insights for where we provide services and what languages may be prevalent in your area. You may reach out to local school systems, especially if you're a nonprofit that works within the schools. All schools need to, they record the native language of the students that are attending their schools. So they may also have a really accurate picture of what a language landscape may look like in a very specific area. And then the last one here that's listed is a website called lep.gov. Because the federal government requires organizations to provide language access, they also provide a resource for folks to do research about that. And we'll go through that here in just a moment. So just some basic stats. I know we have folks from all over the country that are joining us. So the top languages used in the United States are English, Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, which comes from the Philippines, Vietnamese, and Arabic. Now, the top languages here in Central Indiana, which is where we're located and where many of our folks are tuning in from, are English, Spanish, American Sign Language, or ASL. We do have a very robust deaf population here in Central Indiana because we have a nationally renowned school for the deaf here. Burmese is number 4, Arabic, and Punjabi. Now, I did list here at the bottom some languages that are growing and some locations from which Central Indiana has received a number of immigrants and refugees from across the world. And really the reason that I did this was just to showcase that regions can be very, very linguistically diverse. And it's really important for you to reach out to organizations like the Immigrant Welcome Center that work with these populations to be able to ask them for advice on what communities am I missing and what language groups do I need to consider. They can give you really, really great advice on what you might prioritize. All right, so here's the website that I mentioned, lep.gov. This website, some of the data is a little old. I'm hoping that 2020 census data and an updated ACS survey will be added to the website soon. But it's still a great place to start to find resources and to start doing some research on specific areas. So you'll find links to specific resources outside of lep.gov. And then you'll also find this language map app where you can click on by the state and you can click on each county. And it'll give you some really basic statistics about the population there. You can even, when you're actually in the map, you can switch to a table mode and it will list all of the languages that they recorded in their last survey, which again was in 2013. So it's a little old, but it can still give you, kind of a starting place. But they'll list the most prominent languages in the area. So it's just a great place to start with data. Now, if you're a nonprofit that specifically serves folks who live in poverty, you might go a little bit deeper into the data. So what I did here was I took information from the American Community Survey, and I believe this was in 2010. So again, little old data, but it still gives us a place to start. And essentially, we took data about how many non-English speakers in Marion County, which is where Indianapolis is, live in poverty. Using that data, we can use other ACS data about the population in Marion County and how many people in Marion County in general live in poverty. And we can essentially come to the conclusion that in 2010, about 9% of residents living in poverty were Spanish speaking. So we can use this in the nonprofit sector as maybe a starting point for a goal for you all. So if your organization serves folks that live in poverty and 0% of the folks that you serve are Spanish speaking, maybe your goal is to get up to closer to that 9% over time. So we'll use that number as we go through some of these budgeting examples. So the second step in language access planning is to identify language barriers. So really, we're just thinking about communication pathways where language barriers may occur. They've listed some common ones based upon just some basic buckets or stages of communication. So the first one would be outreach, when you're trying to get folks interested into your program. And so that may include printed marketing assets, social media posts and announcements, or community event discussions. Then we think about, once you actually connect with consumers, how are you engaging with them? So that could include a call-in helpline. It could include consumer assessment conversations, or even helping folks to submit applications for programs or for benefits.
Tiff, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I saw that in the chat we had a request for you to try presenter mode again because it's a little small on the screen to read.
Yeah, we'll just see if, I know it's so much better when it's big, but Google Slides is a little wacky. So we'll see if it'll let me advance my slides. Thanks, Una. So the third bucket is going to be onboarding. So this is really where you have done outreach, you've connected with your clients, and now you're bringing them into your programs. So explaining the benefits of the programs or giving them program materials. And then the fourth is just ongoing communications. What do communications look like during service delivery, and how do you provide customer service? So the next step is to identify resources within your organization. So the first step is to understand the resources that you currently have, and then really thinking about the resources that you need to seek out. So the first one is just to think about multilingual team members. Have you actually asked your team members about their language skills? This could include paid staff, this could include volunteers, this could include board members. But have you actually done the work to ask folks what any of their language skills are? And then the second part here to consider is, if the answer to that first question is yes, do you have any specific roles outlined, whether that's paid or unpaid, within your organization for folks to contribute these skill sets? And Grim, I'd love for you to explain just really quickly, the Immigrant Welcome Center does a great job with this second bullet point with one of their programs. Can you talk about the Natural Helpers program real quickly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I love talking about the Natural Helpers program because, as you hear, natural helpers, helping naturally, right? People in the community that already do this kind of work, and we bring them in and equip them with the skills to do it even more. And so, for example, in 2017, I became a natural helper, and I was able to be equipped with these skills. And so, just to read you off some statistics, so 17 natural helpers in the past year have been able to be working with us in the ways that they engage with communities in different languages, 19 languages that we don't speak as staff, and represented from 13 different countries. So it's been an amazing way to see the eyes and the ears of the Immigrant Welcome Center are these volunteers who work with us in that way with their communities that we otherwise can't.
Thank you. So then the next step, if you have a program like Natural Helpers, or if you have staff or volunteer team members that can provide some support, it's also important for you to understand when you should be using professional services versus services that are already built into your organization or that are volunteer services. And one thing that's really challenging for folks is actually being able to assess the language skills of the folks that are working with them. That's something that we as a professional organization do. So really, like on a very basic level, just thinking about how important the information is to make sure that it's accurate by having professional services come in. How high level is the vocabulary? So just depending on if it's very industry specific or if there are terms that may not be used in regular everyday conversations, that maybe when you have a professional services company come in, or when it's something like legal documents or forms that are really important to get right and make sure that those are accurate. Those are just a few examples. And slide transitions. Oh, brother. Sorry about that, guys. Try it again. All right, so giving you some pricing for language services. So this is the baseline pricing for Luna's language services. So the first main service we provide is on-demand telephone interpretation. This is essentially a hotline that you can put in place and folks can call it and get on the phone with an interpreter, typically within less than a minute. So it's pretty instantaneous. This is one service I suggest for every single customer to put into place because it doesn't cost you anything to put it into place or to maintain it there, just to get that resource set up. It's only priced based upon the usage and it's priced by the minute. So here you can see it's $2 a minute for Spanish and $2.50 a minute for all the other languages. It's really great for impromptu and short conversations, as well as conversations with languages that you just may not have available in your organization. The second bucket of services is on-site and virtual interpreting. So on-site services are just as they sound, having a live person come to your physical meeting and joining the meeting. Virtual interpreting is what Becca is doing today, joining a Zoom meeting or a virtual platform to join a meeting. And we have pricing for both spoken language as well as ASL interpretation. So spoken language interpretation, we have two different main types. We have simultaneous interpretation and consecutive interpretation. Consecutive interpretation means the speakers are taking turns speaking, whereas simultaneous interpretation is more like the United Nations, where someone is speaking the language at exactly the same time that the English speaker is. So because simultaneous interpretation takes a lot more skill, that is something that is priced at a higher rate. You can see those rates here, and each of those have a 2-hour minimum. For American Sign Language interpretation, we have essential interpretation, which is mainly for just meetings or general conversations, medical appointments, things like that, where there's more back and forth. We also have event interpretation, which this is at a higher rate because we typically, the interpreter, as you can see Becca continuing to work hard, the interpreter is doing interpretation pretty much through the entire hour, right? Or the entire appointment. So it takes more time, it takes more effort, takes more, more skill. And so that's priced at a higher rate as well. And then translation services are priced based upon a number of variables, including the number of words. So it's not the number of pages, it's the number of words being translated. The source and target languages. So English to Spanish, the price per word is typically 15 cents. Whereas English to Burmese, the price per word is typically 28 cents. So it just depends on the language pairing. And then there may be formatting fees. Those fees are typically applied when one of our project managers has to have design experience in Publisher or some kind of a higher level design program, and it accounts for their skill set and their project management time. We also have a $70 project minimum. And this is when you send us a group of documents or a group of assets to work on, we consider that a project. And it's a $70 minimum per language pairing. Oh, and now it doesn't want to go to the next one. Thank you all for your patience with me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I am so sorry about this.
Tiff, do you want me to take over advancing the slides? I have a downloaded copy.
Yeah, do you mind?
Not at all. Happy to.
My goodness. So I'm gonna stop sharing and Una can start sharing.
Well, when it does that, Tiffany, there's a question in the chat that I think would be very interesting to bring in here before we go on to the next piece. It's, the target audience and group for this organization is deaf and hard of hearing community group who uses ASL and hearing families with a deaf infant or child. The huge barrier and misunderstanding for my organization for language access planning would be the majority of hearing and English users overlooking this group or grouping this community as immigrants, which isn't quite accurate, even though we have some commonalities for language barrier. So this complicated level will be medical community and the hearing world that pushes English as a sole language option to hearing families, ignoring the huge strides in multilingual research and advantage of home languages. ASL isn't the top languages in the USA. So it sounds like they're wanting to know more about ASL here.
Yeah, Marvella, I will need to go back and look at the statistics on that. The statistic that I put in that first slide, I believe we just took for spoken languages, but I included ASL because I had that specific number for the regional, like it's number 3 on our list, English, Spanish, and then American Sign Language. Honestly, you might have the more accurate data on that than I do at this point in time. So feel free to share in the chat and I'm happy to announce that live if we know what number kind of ASL falls in on the national language with. By all means, please share because I'd love to share that information and I'll make sure I include that in future presentations as well. And what Marvella is referring to is really the fact that a lot of hearing folks that have been hearing their entire lives don't understand the differences between American Sign Language and English, whether it's spoken or written. And so many folks who grow up, many deaf folks who grow up utilizing American Sign Language as their native language it may not be appropriate to provide them with materials in English and expect them to have the same comprehension rate because English truly would be their second language. So thank you for pointing that out. All right, so getting into the budgeting examples. So the first one is interpreting for a telephone helpline. Graham, can you provide some insights about why this was something that the Immigrant Welcome Center prioritized?
Absolutely, especially through the pandemic. We realized that there was a lot of necessity for our immigrant communities to speak to us and be comfortable enough to not only share the information, but also have somebody on the line who speaks their same language. Because that was such a necessity, we saw that people on our staff spoke a variety of languages, but due to Luna's language line, 200 languages could be promoted. And so we had a lot more calls coming in of people wanting to know about resources that our center can provide. And the fact that we can now say in their language what they need, not only gave them the space to be able to understand, but feel safe enough that we saw language mattered, and that means they matter too.
Thank you. So here in this example, we took some real data about the Immigrant Welcome Center's usage in the past. So they typically have about 12 calls per month where they need additional support. So for instance, Graham manages a lot of their calls that come in Spanish. So they don't usually need Spanish support, right? So here we have just budgeted for, we took the $2.50 a minute for all the other languages, that price. We budgeted for 12 calls per month with an average duration of 30 minutes. Now, remember, when you're budgeting, you'll need to double that time because you're using consecutive interpretation where folks are taking turns interpreting. And this is the number that we came to. Now, this may be a number that is a little bit higher than what the usage ends up being. It's always better to budget for a little bit more than you might need than for a little bit less. Una, can we go to the next slide? So if you're an organization that's getting started just with Spanish, then again, we may take that same logic, take the average number of calls, the average duration of the call, double that time for the consecutive interpretation. And here we use that 9% number that we got from our ACS survey data to say our eventual goal is to have 9% of these calls be people that are calling us and needing Spanish support. So this number is going to be a number that's larger than you're likely going to need in your first couple of years, but it gives you a starting point to be able to go from. So maybe in the first year, we budget for a quarter of this number, and every year we move up. But at least it gives you a place to start from as you're starting to collect your own data. Next slide. So this one is thinking about those consumer consultations. Graham, can you talk a little bit about why this was something that you all prioritized for this coming year?
Absolutely. So looking now, so people are calling us in that speak different languages, but they also may have somebody who they want to speak to in particular. So our consultation model becomes a partner that they trust. So for example, somebody who's seeking assistance with their rent for that month needs to know, other than English, what that person is saying to them. And so that's where we have that model where we can have the consumer and the consultation take place. In this case, for example, as you can see for Burmese support, none of our staff members speak this language. And so we're able then to have an amazing interaction play out between the partners and the people seeking to help. And so this widens the gap for that trusted advocacy that we spoke about earlier. And it's amazing because then that partner knows moving forward that that person can come to them and trust them.
Awesome. So here, from the budgeting standpoint, Graham and I wanted to budget for one consultating meeting per month. Again, here, notice that although the average meeting time is an hour, we made that for 2 hours, right? Both for the consecutive interpretation as well as the scheduling minimum. And then we get a number here for what they would budget for the year. Next slide. So if you're getting started with Spanish, using that same type of logic and that 9% number, we're taking the number of appointments per year, the app to help consumers fill out, maybe it's a benefits form, maybe it's going through an initial intake process. Eventually, we want to have at least 9% of those to represent our full community to be Spanish speaking, need Spanish support. And we're going to do that math, and this is the number that we're going to come up with. Again, this may be a really high estimate for a first year as you're getting started with your marketing and outreach machine to bring those folks in, but it gives you a place to start to understand how you might budget for the upcoming year until you have more internal data. This is something that we get a lot of questions about, is interpreting for programming and fundraising events. So Graham, can you talk a little bit about the Immigrant Welcome Center's event this past year and kind of how simultaneous interpretation was used?
Yes, with the Immigrant Welcome Center's Live Local, Think Global fundraiser that takes place every year. This year in particular, we needed to have interpreters. So we already had the connection with Luna that we built over the last year. And so it was just amazing to know that we can have a simultaneous interpreter to be able to have the headset and the person who needs the support can enjoy the event and hear all the information, hear all the presentations, hear everything they need to have to bring equity. So not just equality, but equity is what we're bringing by having an interpreter who can do that in the moment.
Perfect. And here, as you can see, $200 is a very small investment to be able to offer that service and to be able to include that many more people in an event. I'll mention too that this is great for live events, but Zoom and other platforms also now have interpretation channels where you can make sure that your virtual events are accessible and use simultaneous interpretation as well. So where most people get started with this and where we have seen the most requests over the past year or two is getting started with American Sign Language interpretation, specifically at community events and like big fundraising events. So if you were going to get started with thinking about how to budget for this, here I've provided an example of we're thinking about providing ASL interpretation for our big annual fundraiser. And then we have a program that we provide through our organization where we provide training, or I mean, it could be any kind of educational programs, right? So we're going to make sure that at least 3 of those have ASL interpretation available. Here we have a 2-hour average duration for all 4 of those events. Now, one thing I want to mention here, this is going to be 4 total programs at 2 hours. Now here with American Sign Language, whenever we have an event that is over 60 minutes, we always require that a team of 2 interpreters is hired to interpret that event. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure that the quality of the interpretation remains very high. And it can be really challenging from a mental standpoint for an interpreter to interpret continuous education for more than a specific duration of time. So you're always going to plan to have a team of 2 interpreters for those events where it's lots of continuous speaking. So here, thinking about translation. So this is more thinking about more document translation. Graham, can you talk a little bit about what you prioritized for this year and why?
Yes, so with all the different people calling us, there was a lot of necessity for them to be able to have an intake form or even just know what's happening around the community. In particular, there was a moment where a curfew happened last year, and for many immigrants, they have no idea what a curfew was. And so we were able then to have Luna services to be able to interpret in 8 different languages and get the word out there as soon as possible, because people were telling us they're stopping us and we don't know why. And it was because of the curfew. It had only been disseminated in English at that time. So over the weekend, we worked hard with Luna. So thank you, Luna, for being there literally 24/7.
So in this, we budgeted for them to, and I put the numbers in here. We budgeted for them to have 1 intake or assessment form translated, again in Burmese, the language that they don't have internally. I estimated it might have been 750 words. If it's something that's created in an easily editable file like Microsoft Word or something like that, there's no formatting fees. So the pricing is pretty straightforward. And so here it would be $210 to make sure that this form, which is one of your vital documents that you provide to every single person that you work with, is something that they can understand in their own language. The second here is I budgeted for 3 instances of kind of what Graham mentioned throughout the year. So 3 instances where they may need to create a social media image and have social media post copy in 5 different languages. So each instance of them having that grouping of assets that needed to be translated is going to be 1 project. And for 5 different languages with that $70 minimum per language, this was the budgetary number that we came up with for the year. All right. So Una is we're gonna pop over to Una now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then one more thing in the chat box, there's about making sure the clarification, Burmese has several dialects. If I'm mistaken, is this about the majority of immigrants are fluent in Burmese is verbal language, but the numbers drop when it comes to Burmese in print. Is that accurate?
So Marvella, that's a great question. There are several, I think there are over 14 different dialects that are here just in central Indiana. And many times our team goes back and forth between which dialect we should use. We always suggest that they provide things in print, but that they also, if it's going to be something that is a meeting or a video, that they should provide it audibly as well. But it also just depends on what the communication plan from the organization is. Typically, we'll also suggest that folks reach out to specific organizations that serve the Burmese community to make those decisions together about what the best way to communicate with that specific audience is, which dialect should they use, and what's the best way to present the information.
Thank you. And one more question from Anita Jackson. Obviously, with the Afghanistan situation taking place, does Luna offer Pashto and Dari translation or interpretation services?
Anita, yes, we do. I can put my email in the chat and you can email me if you need anything.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Next, Una Hartzell-Vard is the Director of Translation for Luna Language Services. She will be talking us through a major project that she worked on with the American Red Cross and how she helped them to build a budget for that. She will also share information about avoiding common pitfalls of translation pricing, making you more efficient with your resources, and understanding how to choose a quality and affordable vendor. Go ahead, Una, take it away.
Thank you so much, Graham. I'm excited to be here with all of you. And thank you to Becca for being our fabulous ASL interpreter. So I never really bonded with case studies until I was done with school, but now it's my favorite way to present information because it's so concrete and approachable. So I wanted to highlight the work that we've done with the American Red Cross. Luna and the Indiana region chapter have worked together over the course of several years as language access has become a higher and higher priority with the Red Cross. And recently, they received a grant to fund a larger scale translation that they've done in the past. So this included a number of training materials as well as timely communication around the pandemic. So as we started this process, we evaluated the projects from the basis of what are those source documents that we're working with, what are the target languages that are needed, and what are the technical requirements of the translation. And these are the basic three areas that we are looking at when it comes to evaluating any translation project. Now, with the Red Cross, we had 3 different buckets that we could put our information into. So the things we already knew about, the existing documents that might need a little bit of editing, but were largely good to go. We could evaluate them for format and for volume of work that needed to be done. The next bucket was the ideas bucket. So there were programs that were developed as concepts, but hadn't actually been implemented yet. And so we would need to look at what the basic parameters or scope of those projects were so that we could then estimate a word count and any potential technical requirements for the project as well. And then there was a bucket that we needed to predict, and this was largely externally driven documentation. So for example, state and federal communications around COVID, as that was a rapidly evolving process, as well as different types of upcoming government-related, city-related, or emergency-related responses that needed to be quickly communicated in a number of different languages. So some of you are already in the midst of having language access as a large component to the work that you're doing, and some of you might be starting off with 1 or 2 pieces. Regardless of where you are in this process, having a plan and understanding a few different aspects to outlining that scope of work is going to be critically helpful in making sure that you're selecting the right languages, making sure that the costs are as comfortable as possible for your organization and that you're planning well around that, and ensuring that the quality and efficiency of the projects is there as well. So the first thing to consider, as Tiffany had already outlined, is what is the community that you're serving? You know, in an ideal world, we can, at the drop of a hat, service any language at any time and have unlimited funds to do so. But the reality is you're likely going to need to pick those top languages that are either walking through your door or should be based on who you're looking to serve. And this can be a huge way to help to narrow down the scope of what you need to do for translation. The next area to consider are the legal requirements. So vital documents, maybe timely communications that affect services, and even things like those intake forms can be vital to having a successful language access plan. And then we want to consider some of the most used, most critical, and most versatile of our documents. And when I say documents, I include things like videos and doing subtitling or dubbing work for those. Things like social media posts, if that's how people are connecting with you, or updates to your website, as well as the more old-fashioned informational brochures, right, or informational packets that we might hand out in a physical format. And when we're looking at all of those documents that we've identified, I grew up reading the Goosebumps books, and I'm a huge fan. So I developed a handy mnemonic of R.L. Stine to determine those technical requirements for the documents or videos or whatever way you're communicating. So first, we want to consider, do we need to recreate these documents as part of the translation? Or do we have raw editable files available? This can definitely impact both how quickly a project can be turned around and the cost of it. We want to look at websites and brochures and informational packets and make sure that we address whether we need to localize images or not. So if the images that you're currently using aren't matching the community that you're serving, that's another way to ensure success of your programs, is people want to see themselves reflected. And that's one of the steps and one of the ways in which they know that they are welcome and that services really are for them as well. The next two go together, the source and target language. And this seems pretty simple, but there are thousands of languages around the world. We're serving about 200 of them within the state of Indiana. And one of the things we want to consider is sometimes some languages can sound similar. We get clients who confuse Korean and Karen quite a bit. And it's a little bit of a spelling difference and a little bit of an emphasis difference. And being really clear about the populations you're serving can help you better understand the languages that you'll need. Additionally, you'll want to consider what are the instructions you need to provide as part of the scope of work. So if you want things delivered in a particular format, or for example, that you want all of your headers and footers to be left in English, or you have a specific naming convention that you want to use for your files, these are some of the basics to consider when providing instructions to your translation project management team. And next, always ask about nonprofit discounts and any other discounts like volume discounts that might be available, and double check that whether they'll stack discounts or whether you're going to have to sort of select the best option available to you. Some companies will stack discounts and others will only provide a nonprofit discount or only provide a volume discount, for example. And then finally, you want to know what your expectations are. What do you want to get out of this relationship with a language services partner? What is your goal for this translation? And what does that look like in terms of communication, accessibility to the project management team, as well as what alignment there is between the organization that's helping you provide language access and the work that's being done in your community. When we're looking at working with language access providers, there are many options out there, especially for translation. We work across borders all the time, and it's really a worldwide network of folks who are there to serve and help provide language access. And so when you're looking at, who do you want to partner with and work with here, I would recommend assessing 3 different areas. You want to look at customer service, you want to look at quality, and you want to look at what are the efficiency and effectiveness, quality assurance measures, and pricing measures that are in place with the organizations you're looking at. So Luna, for example, holds both 9001 and 17100 ISO standard certifications. And this is a process that takes many man hours, a lot of paperwork, blood, sweat, and tears, and also has a cost to it in terms of bringing in external auditors and filing for those certifications. So it's not necessarily attainable to small boutique agencies who may very well be following some of the same quality assurance processes as larger companies like Luna. So it's important to know what you're looking for with quality and with customer service, and not necessarily solely rely on those easy tells of quality like the certifications that they might be holding. And when you're looking at selecting a partner for this work, trust is such a huge component of it, because even in Graham's example at the Immigrant Welcome Center, where you have so many languages that you could do in-house, there's not necessarily the time. Even if you know all the languages in the world, you don't have time to manage all those projects. So having a trusted partner is a key to that experience. So a few things that you can ask yourself to help you evaluate whether a relationship is going to be the right fit for your organization. How responsive is the vendor? How quickly are you receiving responses? Are they answering questions completely? Are you finding yourself needing to follow up? What are their processes like? Are they following the ISO processes, even if they're not certified? And how are they assuring quality? What types of services do they provide? Some small agencies will provide only a few languages and perhaps only simple document translations, while others may provide video subtitling and voiceover work, work in a number of different software platforms, and be able to provide website translation even. Are there different types of projects that they won't work with? So depending on the type of organization that you are, there are sometimes organizations that might not be willing to serve your message. And so knowing that up front will save a lot of time and hassle on the back end when you're selecting a vendor partner. How do they guarantee their quality? So is it through having ISO processes? What types of tools and software are they using for quality measures? And what are the requirements for qualification for their translation teams? What happens if something goes wrong? Because if there's one thing that's true in the world, right, there's always going to be some type of little thing or big thing that pops up, and knowing in advance how issues are mitigated by your partner is a really important step in that process. How trusted are they? Are they in your community? If they're national or international, what are folks saying about them, whether it's online or references that you request? And finally, do their values align with ours? So there are a number of organizations that even if they do a little bit of everything, they have their heart in a particular place. And I know at Luna, our heart is with those immigrant, refugee, and deaf and hard of hearing communities. And this is always our goal, is to find a way to say yes to these opportunities and to provide that language access. And that may or may not be a value of yours in terms of having that alignment, but it's certainly something to consider. So Graham, I will give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Una. And there's a question for you in the chat. So how does the Luna team work with challenging or niche subject matter? We're a movement-based organization that also has a lot of nuance to language. How would we approach making sure that all those nuances are captured in translation/interpretation?
What an absolutely fantastic question. And this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox of having a style guide. So no one will know your organization the way you do. And whether you speak another language or not, and whether you can provide guidance on the terminology you would want to be used, you can still have a great style guide that helps to inform the translation teams of the feel for your organization, of the type of language that should be used in terms of, avoiding certain phrases. So if, for example, you don't like to use the word don't, right? Then you would want to indicate that in a style guide. You can include all kinds of preferences in there about the tone, the formality of your language, the register that translations should be completed in. And the more granular you can get with that, the better of a translation product that you'll have at the end. Oftentimes with really specialized things, we're looking for people who have experience in those areas, whether it's translation experience specifically, or if it's the experience of having worked in that arena themselves, and they're also qualified professional translators.
Thank you so much, Una. And one more thing I'll say about legal requirements you mentioned earlier. A lot of people come to us for birth certificates. They want to translate. And so it's a great way to know that Luna can help with those very sensitive needs that people have. So thank you so much. Tiffany, my next point is for you. So talking about language resources and department budgets and grant proposals, tell me all about what you can tell me about that.
Yeah, so one thing that we encourage all nonprofits to do, and the reason why we host these workshops, is to help you to include these items in your grant proposals so that you already have funding allocated toward it. So when you think about the why of why you would want to include this in your grant proposals, outlining information about inclusion of LEP demographics in your area actually strengthens your grant proposals and shows your grantors how serious you are about serving our full community, right? We're also seeing more organizations that are going to be requiring details about diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in their requests for proposals. We're seeing some of these initiatives through big organizations here in Indiana, like the Central Indiana Community Foundation. This may be something that the public health department starts requiring. So we're going to see more requirements or requests for this type of information, actually, when they're asking for your grant submissions. And then the last point here about a why is that some organizations actually offer grants solely for language-focused initiatives. So one great community partner that Graham and I work with is the Indiana Language Roadmap Program. And every year, I think it's in the spring, every year they provide funds. They're kind of like micro grants. They're, I think, either $1,000 or $1,500 to nonprofit organizations very specifically to fund their language initiatives. So you can find organizations like this that may fund these services very directly as well. And then on the next slide, you'll see some places where we see folks include this within their budgets. So I've seen these items included under administrative costs, communications budgets. One of the organizations I work with actually had a barrier removal fund, and that could be anything from transportation to childcare. She actually used that to get some documents translated. You can have a line that's specifically for language support, or even just include it in your program implementation funding. So really, there's a lot of places that you can include it. And the whole point is just to think about it ahead of time and get some funds in there. You can always reach out to folks like Una or myself to be able to help you plan and think through this whole process. Obviously, there are numerous ways that you can overcome an infinite number of language barrier opportunities. And we're here to help you through that process so that you can put the funds you need in place and have a plan moving forward rather than reacting to a need in the moment later on.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. One last question we have here is regarding the video recording. So many people are really interested to have this recording. So this recording will be posted on YouTube as well as emailed to all participants today. Thank you so much for being here. Gracias. If nothing else, adios. Tengan buen día.